Let's take a look at some information charts on Zcash for BraveNewCoin. Unlike Monero, Zcash has privacy by choice, which runs into some issues legally from a regulatory perspective on exchanges. They don't like to add that feature. I'm just going to give you the facts. It's going to sound biased, but these are the facts, okay? Monero is privacy by default, very hard to trace and track. Zcash, privacy is not by default. It functions using shielding and unshielding addresses. Unless it's end-to-end encrypted, it is not private. And even when it's end-to-end encrypted, chain analysis says, you know, I got you, law enforcement. We can solve this puzzle. Most privacy works by mixing stuff together. Wasabi, Tornado Cash, Monero. And if the pool isn't big enough, if the mixing pool isn't big enough, you run into issues with de-anonymizing transactions, or if the on-ramps and off-ramps are known, are public, then it's much easier to track and trace what happens there. So keep in mind, yeah, they have privacy capabilities, but unless you're using this in a wallet, you know, Gemini, for example, I don't believe has shielded transactions available. So anyway, just keep that in mind. It's important to know. I'm just here to provide facts. They even talked about going privacy by default in 2018, and I don't know where that is currently, if that's still on the table. I don't know what their proof of stake discussion is like. They've talked about moving to proof of stake for a little while now. My big grand bargaining theory is that eventually Zcash will just merge into Ethereum and become an ERC20 token. I don't know how that would look or what that would look, what would work around that. I have no idea, but I think that'd be interesting. If we look at the shielded Zcash stored in shielded pools, it has been rising. It has been increasing. It's been rising in the newer version of their shielded pools. The question is, what percentage of total Zcash is this? Is it enough to stay anonymous if you're shielding, right? Like, let's say you're doing everything correctly. You're using Tor, or you're using something to obscure your IP address. You're using sapling, end-to-end encryption. Can it still be tracked and traced, right? That's a question for chain analysis to answer. But my guess is, yeah, you can probably still figure out what's going on there. And if we look at transactions by quarter, according to Electric Coin Company, which is the parent company, is the wrong word. They develop Zcash, collect the mining, reward it to some degree to a higher percentage. I'm not even going to get into that. Not even going to talk about it. But they get a percentage of the block reward. In any case, transactions per quarter, transparent versus partially or fully shielded. Really, the only ones that I would trust are the fully shielded, and it has to be end to end, and that's a very small percentage of total transactions per quarter. Now, keep in mind, any coin metrics data I show you will not include stats from those transactions because they are fully shielded. So unless you're digging deep into that stuff, it's not going to be readily apparent for on-chain metrics. But still, this is a very small percentage. Is it growing over the past 3 years? Yeah. But this is the issue you run into when it's not privacy by default. They need more fully shielded transactions, and the best way to do this is to do it through exchanges. Look at SegWit, look at any governance thing. You know, it's sad, but it's true. Until exchanges adopt it, it's just not happening. Most people don't use these as currencies. They're speculative vehicles for many people, so they just live on exchanges, and they're not going to go out of their way to use this shielded stuff unless you're, you know, Zcash hobbyist or community member, basically, is my read on this thing. If you look at hash rate and difficulty, it's ranged since 2018. It's hit all-time highs actually recently this year, but it's down since China is gone and prices in general have come down. Now, I don't know how much mining Zcash had in China, but correlation is not causation, clearly, but you know, they are one-to-one here as far as when China left versus when hash rate started to fall off. Price also obviously a big factor there. If you look at 4 cents per kilowatt hour profitability for Zcash miners using the Equihash algorithm, all of them are in profit. There haven't been any new ASICs since 2020. So a lot of these are probably dead or on their way out at this point, which means most of the mining is probably GPU mining. If I had to guess, I don't know too much about Equihash, but I'm assuming GPU mining works just fine. And that's what many of these proof of work chains are going to have to rely on in the future if nobody makes an ASIC, right? If Bitmain or, you know, Silicon isn't making Equihash ASICs, then what are they going to do? You know, the network has to get secured in some fashion. Either that's through GPUs and CPUs, or they go proof of stake, right? Or there's cloud mining or something, right? There's something else to take its place. But when we're talking about security of a proof of work network, you need hash rate, you need difficulty to prevent double spends, 51% attacks, forks, that sort of thing. If you look at transaction counts, again, this does not include shielded transactions. Fully shielded, I don't know if it includes partially shielded. In any case, transactions unexcitingly flat really since 2018. If we average this out a little bit, really since 2019, it hasn't made a new high in daily transactions. This is 3,860 transactions per day currently, which is relatively nothing. And it's sad but true, but if there isn't any hype on a coin, if they don't do NFTs, if they don't do DeFi, if they don't do ICOs, if they're not listed places, no one's going to use them. Nobody cares. They just disappear into the ether, right? Counterparty, one that I hadn't heard of in years, all of a sudden is popular again because of NFTs, Pepe NFTs, right? But there are plenty of coins that have just disappeared, gone delisted, never to be heard from again. So if you start to see Zcash get delisted, not saying this will happen, but if you do, that's the first sign. That's with anything. That's why Ripple was so problematic, because it was getting delisted on American exchanges. And from a regulatory perspective, like I already said, these private coins or privacy coins have trouble getting listed and staying listed because of privacy concerns. The fact that Zcash is optional privacy has actually helped it stay listed on exchanges versus Monero, which is continuously getting delisted from exchanges or just not being listed at all. So listings are hugely important and impactful to on-chain metrics, speculative potential, that sort of thing. Fees are quite low. Fees are, what are they? Less than a nickel a transaction. I don't know how that changes for fully encrypted transactions. I'm guessing that's more, slightly, but not by much. And block size is still basically flat. Block size is basically empty. It's a ghost town. It's like ADA, just complete ghost town. So yeah, fees are low if block sizes are 0, right? Once block sizes pick up remotely, at least previously, I'm sure they've added additional scaling measures since 2018. But once block sizes pick up slightly, most of these chains just crumble under their own weight. They don't scale, they can't scale. That's the dirty little secret here of everything in blockchain. Look at Ethereum, right? So layer 1 has trouble scaling. But yes, right now fees are very low on Zcash. NVT was at basically an all-time low and is rising slightly again. You want to see NVT falling. That says, based on economic utility, market cap is undervalued. If we look at active addresses had been rising significantly, but are now falling again from May to present. So if you want to be bullish on anything, you want to see transaction counts rising, you want to see active addresses rising, you want to see NVT falling, you want to see robust on-chain activity, you want to see listings, you want to see Google Trends going to infinity, which is definitely not the case here for Zcash. Now, all this isn't to say this thing can't turn the corner, but this isn't a picture where there's an expectation of bullishness. Tech looks actually really good, but the fundamentals are garbage for Zcash. They're in the garbage basura bin. MVRV, last on-chain thing I'll look at before the TA, is currently sitting at 1.08. MVRV for most coins caps out at 2x, so that means market cap is 2 times greater than on-chain activity. This doesn't include shielded stuff, but as a backtesting metric, this has worked out. Previously, MVRV reached 2.5, then 2 again. That was the all-time high and is currently effectively the all-time high since 2018. And the recent high at 302 hit an MVRV of 2.05. So regardless of your feelings on Zcash, if I was trading it, I'd be looking to this. Let's say we're in a multi-week bull thing, right? Rally, as some people call it. What does MVRV look like towards the time when you're thinking, all right, we've broken 65 successive higher highs? What is MVRV telling me it's probably time to get out? Is this look overheated? What does the backtesting on this say? Buy zone for this MVRV on Zcash is probably sub 0.5. I'm looking at this, trying to figure out the y-axis, but this is 0.5. So anything below 0.5 is probably a buy, a strong buy, let's say. 1 is neutral, and then 2 is overheated, overbought. Flipping to technicals, this is the 1-year MA in the green and the multiplier in the red. This is a 5 times multiple, and the white is the midline. Now for most coins, they have the ability to reach their 5x multiple. or have reached their 5x multiple at some point in their life cycle. Zcash has not done so, so it's inappropriate to assume it will do so ever until it does so, right? So right now, the high end for Zcash is probably around 360, which is the midline that it's hit twice, once in 2017 and then once recently in 2021. It did hit the buy zone briefly. This has a history of just extended bearish stuff in buy zones. Even still, these buys eventually worked out. You know, they didn't actually get you into mega profits like some of these coins, but it did turn a corner eventually. So upside's going to keep increasing slowly, but 359 is where I'd look. For instance, if you want to marry on-chain and TA, look at this. Is it at midline or greater? And then look at MVRV. What is MVRV telling you? Is MVRV above 2 when this is above the midline? Because that's probably a pretty good time to start rotating out and back into something else or into cash. So I'd love to say this thing's headed to 600, but it hasn't ever hit its multiple. So realistically, the multiple is probably 2.5x, which is the midline in the white there at 360. It is experiencing a bullish 5200 cross here on the EMAs on the daily, holding above a yearly pivot, holding in this notch of volume. It got supported where it needed to, sub 100 at around 80. Had this 3-drive, triple bottom, whatever you want to call it, that reversed kind of with everything else. So it wouldn't surprise me if this thing continues to move up, but I don't expect it to outperform anything. You know, like it didn't necessarily outperform anything in January to May, at least in a big way. It had trouble holding those highs every time. So yeah, this is bullish. You know, I like 250, whatever this volume node is here, whatever this yearly pivot is. Things look fine for up. And the cloud loves it on the daily. The cloud says, you're in an edge trade, my friend. It is bullish TK cross here with a target of 237 active trade. Currently, entry was into the cloud, exit is 237, the other edge of the cloud, and your stop loss is 128 to 116, depending on whatever, you know, your personal factors. Leverage, risk tolerance, blah, 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 size. Anything below that is below the cloud, and that is risking bearish continuation at that point. But currently, it's working on an active bullish reversal, and you can even see that on the 12-hour as far as entry, exit, stop loss down here. So if you're bullish, you don't want to see this thing head and shoulders basically on low time frames and turn below 140, which is going to bring you to 130, and then you're at risk of sub 130, which definitely cancels out any of this bullish momentum. But yeah, I mean, I like 237 here. It isn't a 2x, but it's a decent move for Zcash. If you look at the ZBTC chart, it's perpetually been in a bearish pitchfork. For the most part, it's held a bearish 5200 cross, and it's below yearly pivots. It's below volume. I mean, until this thing is really above 0045, it's probably just a giant ignore, because that's where most of the volume is on the upside. And at that point, it'll be above the pitchfork and near the yearly pivot. Now, this thing did do well against BTC in February, early May, but all that has been retraced at this point. So I definitely watch that 0045 level. And against ETH, it is quite depressing. It is only down. It is only all-time low after all-time low. But when you think about it, fundamentally, why would you hold the Zcash over ETH? You just wouldn't. I can't think of a reason. Maybe you're pro-privacy, and I don't know. You know, I don't know. I literally don't know. But it's always important to look at these odd pairs, even if they're not listed anywhere. This is actually listed on Poloniex, but look at Zcash against Monero. Look at Zcash against LTC. You know, look at Zcash against EOS. Look at all those things. Look at the odd pairs. There's always an opportunity cost. Look at Zcash against the S&P, right? Like, that would be a funny chart to look at. Matter of fact, let me just pull that up real quick. Well, it basically looks like the USD chart, but my point is, you know, if you're holding something, you're basically short something else. You know, your expectation is that this is going to outperform USD or BTC or ETH over time. So if it consistently doesn't, like this, you know, what are you doing? What are we doing here? Why bother, right? You can have feelings about one or the other, but this is pretty clear. ETH is the winner, no matter how you slice it. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETH BTC fund and DeFi portfolio I trade for Techemy Capital on Enzyme.finance, a non-custodial portfolio management solution where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. You can see everything, including AUM, performance, allocation, all of the fun yield plays I'm in, all the percentages I'm in, everything. This is sort of the confidence meter for expectation of moves. Some of these allocation percentages are based on yield as well, because let's say yield on SNX right now is at 32%. At least it was a few minutes ago, 33%. So yeah, I'm going to hold this all day long, right? That's an excellent yield for anything, especially if it's an appreciating asset. We also divide this into subcategories so that I don't hold too much as a percentage of exchanges versus lending and borrowing versus DEX aggregators versus some miscellaneous category. So that's another reason why the percentages are the way they are. But you can also see the trades tab at the bottom here, everything that happens and when and where it gets routed. Most of the time it gets routed through various places based on liquidity, and fees also play a big factor there. So that's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe. Happy trading.